Hey everybody, welcome to this last edition of What the Football for the 2024 season. Suzy and Amy with you to break down this Super Bowl that we saw on Sunday. The great Jim Nantz will be with us shortly. It's a tradition unlike any other. He starts the season with us. He ends the season with us. We are so lucky to have his time.
Sure are.
You felt like you were in a familiar situation to the Chiefs as you watched the Super Bowl, no doubt, with a giant bowl of ice cream in your hands. What were you thinking when you watched?
Well, it'll be very interesting to see how the Chiefs organization recovers from this. It's hard, Suze. We lost a Super Bowl by a significant number of points. I will never, ever forget the look on Al Davis's face when I saw him immediately after the game.
What year was it? Set the table for us.
2002 season, so okay. January 2003, we lost to the Buccaneers. The game was in San Diego. That was the only year that I can remember, although I'm told there was another year, where there was no week off between the championship game and the Super Bowl. That certainly harmed us as we were facing our former coach, John Gruden, who knew all our signals, all our play calls. And I'm not taking anything from the Buccaneers. They beat us. They won. But had we had that extra week, could Bill Callahan have changed the call signals? Could he have changed some of the things that John knew? Sure, he could have. But again, they won. But we lost by a lot of points.
Yeah, 48-21.
And when I saw Al's face after the game, it still makes me want to cry. And of course, Suzy, and this is why I was thinking of the Chiefs as I watched the Super Bowl come to an end. The game ends. And when you're part of the losing team, you just want to go and be alone and be by yourself, and you can't because you still have to entertain your sponsors. You still have to entertain your advertisers. The players don't have to do it. The coaches don't have to do it, but the executives do. So here you lose this game, and your sponsors are there, your business partners are there, your local media rights holders are there. You've got to have a, quote, party, close quote, but it ain't a party. But they want to have fun. They've spent their money supporting you all year. You've got to entertain them after the game. And I just remember, God, I'm getting choked up now, going to that after the Super Bowl we lost. Couldn't end soon enough for my taste. Went up to our hotel room, lay down on the bed wearing exactly what I'd worn to the game, and cried myself to sleep on my husband's shoulder.
Oh, my God. That's just, it's, I can't imagine having to entertain people after that. You mentioned Al's face. What do you think he was thinking? Because you know that he was at a point in his life where the time was running short.
Yeah, I guess the best way I could describe the look on his face was heartbroken. You know, there were times I would see him after the games and the look on his face was anger or fury because he knew that if we had done X or Y or Z, the outcome wouldn't have been what it was. In this instance, the best way I can describe the look on his face was utter heartbreak.
Well, it's hard to watch, and as we see a lot of the owners in the league right now who are getting older, and you see that their mortality is looming before them, I can only imagine what that was like for Al, and I would put that forward now. Obviously, the owner of the Chiefs is hardly in the same age bracket as Al was then, but seeing your team really disintegrate the way they did on such a huge stage had to have been heartbreaking for the Chiefs and for that ownership group. But in a way, Amy, should we be surprised if you look at how the Chiefs played this year? And it was a series of narrow wins. And we knew that their offensive line and their defensive line were banged up. And we knew that they needed help in those places and didn't have it, as compared to the Eagles, who got stronger at the line of scrimmage on both sides.
And that's where games are won or lost, at the line of scrimmage. I mean, you stated that perfectly, Suzy. Kansas City had line problems all year. Their offensive line was sort of put together with tape and glue, and it got better at times. Was I surprised the Chiefs lost? No, I wouldn't have been surprised if they won either. I was surprised by the manner in which they lost. And we know it can be hard to recover from a loss like that, but I have confidence that if someone can, Andy Reid can.
I'm so impressed with Jalen Hurts, and I feel like in a lot of ways, you know, and I feel this way having covered the Lakers for so long, when you're playing a team that's so huge, like the Chiefs have become, that the conversation is more about the Chiefs, no matter what more so than the Eagles, right? They're outshined. It's kind of like when the Lakers were playing the Jazz. That's how I would equate it. Or even the 76ers that first year of the three-peat. But you look at Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. He is a very quiet leader. Patrick Mahomes is very chirpy. We hear from him all the time. He's a lot more public. One thing that impresses me so much about Jalen Hurts is the quiet way in which he leads. I also think that he is a role model in many ways. He has an all-female management team. He was asked why. And he said, because I chose the best people. Okay, I'll take that. He has become so involved with inner city Philadelphia. He has an organization where he puts in air conditioners in public schools where the kids are sweltering in the summer. He just seems to me to be such a quiet leader, and it seemed to be exactly what that team needed. And maybe that's why I think the Philadelphia fans are not surprised. But I think maybe that's why a lot of people are surprised, because they quietly, and Sirianni and Roseman quietly, and Fangio quietly put on an incredibly effective team as a whole, and led by a guy that was all but written off and benched during a college football national championship game, and then passed over for drafts, and was beaten a couple of years ago. And maybe there was, I hate saying there's a chip on his shoulder. Maybe it was his time to come out and say, I don't have to yell and scream to get the attention.
Well, and there's a great saying that I use all the time. I just love it, and it explains a lot, and maybe it does for him as well, which is, go ahead, underestimate me. That'll be fun. Mm-hmm. You mentioned also all the focus on the Chiefs and the three-peat and the attention. I'm sure that was a subject in the Eagles locker room.
And even with Sirianni, he was all but written off earlier in the season. And then Andy Reid, it's all about Andy Reid. It's all about Andy Reid as the genius. And again, I don't discount Andy Reid at all. I give him incredible props for being the coach that he is. But it is interesting how the underdog, are we even calling him the underdog?
Yeah, I mean, it was a smidge of an underdog. The other comment that really struck me after the game was Saquon saying to Howie Roseman, "Thank you for believing in me."
Yeah, no kidding, right? And even though they were able to limit him on the ground, he had six catches or whatever.
He had a great game.
He had a great game, but it showed how well prepared the Philadelphia coaching staff was for Kansas City.
And the other thing about Saquon, and we saw it throughout the season when he was asked, do you want to go back in and set this record and set this record? No, let the other guys have a chance. I mean, he epitomizes team player.
Yeah, so we send our congratulations to the Eagles. And now, of course, begins the countdown to next season, because it's already been 2 days without football. So now we have to immediately say, will the Eagles be back, and will they repeat, since they put an end to the Kansas City three-peat?
And whenever I hear that, I think, can't we just have 1 week to breathe? 1 week.
And as promised, Jim Nantz joins us. We always love starting the season with you, ending the season with you, and we're grateful for your time.
Well, I'm a guy that likes things that come in full context and symmetry and all this. That's classical storytelling, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So to have the beginning and the end of the season with you both, it's special to me too. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Jim.
It's fantastic. Tell me about your thoughts on this Eagles story, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the Super Bowl turned out.
I think the final score was one of the most misleading final scores that I've ever seen in any game. This was not a 40-22 game. This was a 40-6 game. And I think if there's anybody that's a little unhappy right now in Philadelphia, there aren't many. And listen, overall, I'm sure he's ecstatic. But I know Vic Fangio really well. And trust me, giving up 16 points in the last 4 minutes on his record, that was a 40-6 kind of defensive effort, not a 40-22 game. So I know the ring is the thing, but I also know the mindset of these coaches. I'm sure he cringed giving up a couple of late touchdowns and twos. But it was a beatdown. It was one of the 3 or 4 biggest blowouts in the history of the Super Bowl. It never felt competitive to me.
Why do you think it went down this way? I'm so curious, because I think that the narrative was so heavily Chiefs leading into this game, the talk about the three-peat, Mahomes every other word. I wonder how much of that affected the Eagles.
I'm sure they got tired of hearing about it, but I also think it put weight on the Chiefs, the burden of trying to do that. And then just the weight of trying to go against that defensive front. They got completely manhandled at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. I mean, it spoke to Howie Roseman's drafting ability and what they had done in terms of going out and acquiring the talent to have guys up front. Some guys are not even the biggest stars, but Sweat and Williams and, Carter's taking up two people. I mean, it was an amazing testament to how you can win if you can win in the trenches.
Well, and that's where, as you know, that's where most games are won or lost, at the line of scrimmage. And I was particularly moved by Saquon's observation in that regard when he said in his first practice with the Eagles, he looked around at the offensive linemen and, this is my word, not his, but essentially he said, wow. The flip side of that is, of course, Jim, Kansas City's problems on the offensive line. We saw it all season. They had to move guards to tackle. They had to play around with the line. How did this happen again to Kansas City, given that they had the same problem a few years ago?
Well, first off, I want to just say, for anybody who's going to play a game of gotcha out there, I am not really driving. I am moving about 50 feet as directed here in Carline to pick up my children. So I'm not out on the streets. I'm in a parking lot, and I'm going to settle this thing down in about 2 seconds.
Duly noted.
Yeah, and I also do drive with a seatbelt.
We trust you. We trust you.
So I think there were really issues there all year long, truth be known. And for whatever reason, teams were not able to expose it. I mean, Buffalo didn't produce any kind of real serious threat. Like what we saw with Philadelphia. You're moving Tooney to the outside. You're bringing Caliendo up. You're starting him, Taylor on the right side. When he's not committing pre-snap penalties, he's been a problem. They did not have this situation arrested. And I did the game that you referenced, the Tampa game, where, again, they just got out physical at the line of scrimmage. But it sure felt like that game. So over and over again, I felt like I was watching a game that I had called, but this was worse. This was much worse for Kansas City.
And why do you think it got this way, Jim?
I know it's easy to say this now because everybody asks both of you who's going to win the game, and America loves to talk by the water cooler about who they think is going to win the game. And my stock line was, I think Kansas City, if it wins, will be a close one. But I really believe Philadelphia has the ability to blow them out. So I've heard from some Philadelphia friends who would ask me that question leading up to it. And I told them, I think your team might win in a blowout. I thought that the roster just was that much better. When you have Saquon, you start there. You have two great players on the outside and AJ and Devontae. You got a solid tight end if that's what you want to go to. They didn't have to go to Dallas that often. You've got a really good offensive line. You've got a super talented quarterback. And then that defensive line is probably the best in football. They went out and struck gold with Mitchell and DeJean in the secondary. The rookies this year played well beyond their year. I mean, they're loaded, just absolutely loaded. I think it was the best roster in football, and it showed.
And it's interesting, as Sirianni was pointing out, about the adversity that he'd gone through in 2023 and how he'd learned from that the same way that he learned from, or the Eagles had learned from their loss. That was such a tight loss 2 years ago. And it just seems that we're seeing the past repeat itself here, where they're learning. It seems like the Eagles learned what was going wrong for them, and the Chiefs are in that vortex of having to figure out the same thing over and over again. Have you ever seen, you've called more games of the Chiefs than anybody. Have you ever seen them play the way they played on Sunday?
Nothing even close. Well, if there was anything that was somewhere in the stratosphere, it would have been that Super Bowl game in Super Bowl 55 in Tampa, the COVID Super Bowl game. That's the only one, but it was not a massacre like this. Now, we know they were able to rebuild from that and come back and win the next two. But I think they've got a bigger task at hand. I really think this is going to take some overhauling at a number of positions, right on the offensive line to start with. You're looking at Kelsey right here. Is he going to come back? I don't know. There's a lot to rebuild there, and I don't want to take anything away from Brett Veach. He's very capable. He's got the rings to show it. They're going to have a very active off season. And I referenced at the start about just the mindset that this was a 40-22 final as opposed to 40-6 or 47-6. I actually think that's big for Kansas City. I do, as silly as this sounds. If you went into the offseason at 40-6, you got to be asking yourself questions. Can I ever get back there? How much do we have to start over? It plays on your mind. It would be really difficult to ever dig out of that. Weirdly, 40-22 says, and we all know they got completely dominated. But at 40-22, you go into the season, it's a respectable score. We've come back before from a similar margin. And, we'll go figure this thing out. We got Patrick Mahomes. And listen, we got Andy Reid.
Yes.
And I really think that, Kansas City's going to come back, and you watch. We're not done with Andy Reid yet.
It is hard to come back from a loss, but I would say the same thing, Jim. If any coach can do it and come back from that Super Bowl loss feeling, it's Andy. I have a question for you about the change in the league's onside kick rule, because there was an opportunity here where I think it was like 40 or 45 seconds or so before the Chiefs would have had the opportunity under the new rule to use an onside kick. Do you have any views on that and how it might have impacted the game? And I guess the answer is we don't know, because it's very hard to be successful with an onside kick.
I missed the play. That's all I can tell you. I really missed the play. I thought it, and I know what the percentages were. The percentages were almost negligible. We almost had no recoveries under the old rules, but I still like the surprise element.
Yep.
I know this was done in an effort for promoting safety, et cetera, but I missed the onside kick. The surprise onside kick.
They should take it out altogether. It doesn't work. It's a failed pretense. I mean, it's really.
I got you. Either leave it in or take it out.
That's it.
Yeah.
I that's how I feel. I every time they line up for that, I think this is so silly. We know it's going to happen.
Jim made some great observations about Howie Roseman, and in the wake of the MVP vote, and we all know MVP is most valuable player. You could argue that Howie Roseman was the MVP of this game, or Vic Fangio.
You know what? I think you really could. You definitely could make that argument. But what Howie stocked and put together, you do have to let your mind move forward a little bit and say, wow, they're going to have this same roster back next year. They're going to be an overwhelming favorite next year to repeat. They may be the team. I'm going to get carried away here, but maybe they're the team that goes out there and sets the record for the first three-peat.
Ooh.
This team's going to be around. This is they're loaded.
That just gave me goosebumps.
The other thing is, I watched the game thinking, what is Baltimore thinking? What is Buffalo thinking? I still think Philadelphia proved they're the best team in football, but I think the game would have been a heck of a lot more competitive. It wouldn't take much, by the way. It wouldn't have really taken that much. But I do think that Baltimore maybe had the team that could have played them best.
Absolutely agree. Baltimore had the best shot.
I had the game, by the way, on Thanksgiving Sunday of Philadelphia at Baltimore. And it was a heck of a game. It was a close game. Could have gone either way. Philly ended up winning the game.
I wonder, I think we're guilty in a lot of ways of doing what often happens where we're talking about the Chiefs and their loss more than we're talking about the Eagles and their win. And I wonder if that's just because we were so heavily focused on the three-peat, like I said earlier, and Mahomes and what have you. But I want to go to Jalen Hurts and ask you your opinion of watching him mature and watching his game ascend to a new level with the time that you spent talking to him before games and covering his games and calling his games in Philadelphia and beyond.
I saw him twice this year, Amy, and I've had him I think twice a year since he became the starter. And I'm always blown away. First off, I like him. He's a Houston area kid where I have stakes in that community. He's from Channelview. His dad was a coach. And I think sometimes it gets lost. And I've always wanted to articulate it better when I've had his games, is this fiery competitiveness that lives inside of him. He wants it so badly. I don't think any of us have ever really done a great job of showing people how much winning means to him. He's a tremendous leader. Now, having said that, and hey, the way he plays, again, if he keeps everybody and everyone's healthy, what's going to slow him down next year? I want to address one other thing while we're talking rules. You talked onside kick. I'm done with the tush push.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I think it needs to go away. And I know that's a big part of the arsenal for the Eagles. I think it needs to change. Now, they execute it better than anyone. So Philadelphia fans, will there be an outcry? Say, why are you penalizing us? I don't like the play.
Why?
I just don't like the play. It feels too automatic. You know, they had a point in the first half where they settled for a field goal. It was at 7-0. I believe it was a 7-0. And they got down. Maybe it was it might have been. Yeah, I think it was at 7-0. But they had first and goal at the 4. First and goal at the 4. Why wouldn't you have just run the tush push? You got 4 plays to get it across. You're probably only going to need 3, maybe 2. Jalen doesn't fumble that snap. He doesn't. I mean, he's going to get 1.5 yards every single time. And it was later in the game that I think about it, because I think it would have completely broken if they weren't already mentally broken in that game, just imposing their will on that. But I don't like the play. It just doesn't feel like football to me.
Well, because it's not football. It's not a running play. It's not a passing play. It's just shoving.
And maybe you could do something to phase it out a little bit and not totally penalize. Maybe it's like coaches' challenges. Maybe you get 2 a game.
Oh, interesting. Very creative.
Yeah. Don't take it completely away, but you have that in your hip pocket. If you're going to use it, you can use it twice in a game. Let's see where it goes from there.
Suzy, you raised a great point about all the focus on the losing team, or so much focus on the losing team. And as I've shared with you before, and Jim, you know this person. You remember Al Locasal, I am sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he said to me very, very early in my career, there's always so much focus on the team that lost as opposed to the team that won. And so when you said that, Suzy, it harkened that back. You know what? Philadelphia deserves... what is it we say now? All the flowers?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. They deserve all the attention. That was I think they were under the radar, by the way, all season long. I do. I think they were in the wake of all the attention that Detroit gathered. And I get it. But they were just sitting there all season long. And most of the stories that were coming out about the Eagles were negative. You know, it's like anti-Sirianni. Is he a good coach or not? Well, obviously, he's doing a lot of things exceptionally well. I have a lot of regard for Nick. I really do. But that seemed to be the storyline with the Eagles, was the incredible play at Saquon and all this negativity towards Sirianni.
They were calling for his head earlier in the season. Calling for his head.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we see the beginning of a dynasty starting here in Philly? We love to talk about dynasties and building traditions.
I get back to the point of the roster. It's loaded. I anticipate that's going to look exactly the same next year. And if this team's hungry, and I can promise you one thing, they've got a quarterback that's as hungry as anybody in the league. There are a lot of guys that are hungry, but I've never seen anyone more.
Interesting.
Well, maybe some of it is more into winning than Jalen Hurts. And the times that I've met with him, there's still got to be a little bit of a sting for him getting replaced in a national championship game. Imagine that. I mean, here he was getting replaced at halftime by Coach Saban, who brought in Tua. Mm-hmm. Tua won the championship, and Jalen ended up transferring to Oklahoma. And he went to Oklahoma and had that extra year of eligibility. Did anybody ever think at that time that Jalen Hurts was a Super Bowl MVP quarterback, they basically ran him off at Alabama.
You know, Jim, for you to say that he is the player you have seen that wants to win the most is quite a statement, because you have met with the very, very, very best throughout your tremendous career. So that's a very powerful statement. And
make sure you understand and put it into the context of no one more. You know, trust me, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, they want it at that level too.
Understood.
But I've never met anyone who wants it more.
Okay.
And that message has never really been out there, I don't feel.
No, and then
how badly he wants it.
Great clarification. Understood.
And then, 5 years ago, 4 quarterbacks were drafted before him. And then he loses to Mahomes. And he seems like he's always been in the parentheses. He's never been the star. This whole year has been the Mahomes show. It has just been that. And I'm sure with the Taylor Swift of it all, adding the attention to Kansas City. But it could just be because this is a guy who has a very silent power about him. Apparently, he gave a rousing speech about this is the moment and about it's been so great this season, let's keep it going. But it just goes to show you that you can be an incredibly powerful leader without yelling and screaming.
Now, he definitely has the attention of his teammates. There's no question. He is a powerful leader. And that you saw. And now that you tell that story about what he said to his team before the game, the way he addressed his team, I really feel like that's who he is all the time. He's been lost in all the talk about these other quarterbacks. He's had a number of good years in a row. And you know what? One of the real weapons he has is on these quarterback draws. So we talk about him a lot. We've addressed the Tush Push and how he scores the 1-yard touchdowns and all that. But when he takes off out of the pocket, and sometimes it's not a design play, he's got an acceleration that is scary good.
And we saw how hard it was to stop him.
Yes. I mean, there are guys that take off and run you over like Josh. And sometimes Patrick will surprise you by picking up a 30-yard scramble run, which has happened in some very big games for them. And, of course, Lamar's got the elusiveness, and it's just amazing to watch. But there's a sprinter's kind of feel to Jalen Hurts when he takes off. That's more so than anyone else I see at that position when they use their legs.
Let's talk about moving forward, because let's face it, the season never ends. Now we're already in the new season. What are you most excited for as you look forward to calling yet another season on CBS?
Well, I'm just having finished 21 weeks of it. I loved every second of it. You know, we stepped aside after the Kansas City Buffalo game. Every single week is a blast. I don't know. I'm on the other side of the moon, calling some golf tournaments. I'll be down at Torrey Pines in San Diego this week. The Masters is around the corner. Suzy, I think you were saying a tradition unlike any other. It's a really good line. May I borrow that?
Would you like to have that? I did ask you this before, and I'm conscious of the time, but I have to ask for all your myriad fans out there. How often is that said to you, and do you ever get sick of it?
Never get sick of it. It's a way of interacting with people, and truly, I'm honored that people.
And you know what? When people say it to you, I have every confidence it is intended as the honor it is.
Did you ever think it would become what it is?
No idea. You know, the one that's easier for people to say maybe is the hello friends, because
I love that.
Want you to know that they're coming to you.
I love
and
that.
That had no intention of her being a signature line or whatever you call it. That was purely an attempt to connect with my dad, my ailing father, whose mind was slipping away into the dark world of Alzheimer's. And that was my tug on the ear, Dad, I'm thinking of you moment when I would say hello, friends. But people say that the most often. And I hear that truly every day. If I roll down my window here in Caroline, liable to have, if it wasn't a rainy day, a parent to yell over, hello, friend.
I love that. I love that line, and I love that people shout that to you.
You know what? there's brings a warmth to it.
Mm-hmm.
People are not being confrontational when they say it. I had no idea it would evolve into this, but hey, I credit that to the greatness of my dad, who somehow, because of him, that simple phrase just dropped into my head, and it's a good part of my life. I'm grateful.
As we leave you to your kids,
and now I've got two little. I got my 3rd and 5th graders coming. That's right, folks. I actually have a 3rd and 5th grader. They're making their way, marching down in Carline,
Love it.
ready for Daddy to give them their undivided attention. But let me just say, we have our own little tradition, unlike any other.
we do.
That's front and back. So I trust in September
Yay.
we're going to go back and do it again.
I really hope so.
Jim, one last comment, which is on your way home. I don't know if you know this, but I represent your children, and I think there should be an ice cream stop on the way home.
We're stopping. We are stopping.
Good.
Yeah, we are stopping at their favorite place. They already told me when I drove them to school this morning, we have something up our sleeve. And you were right on.
Jim, you're the
a great
best.
rep.
Thank you for your time. We'll let
Thank
you
you
go.
both. Huge admirer of you both. So thank you for having me, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you,
Jim.
Jim.
All best. Bye-bye now.
There's nobody better than Jim Nantz. He always makes time for us, and we're so appreciative. He will, of course, be our first guest as we come back in the fall. And we are going to take a break after this, take a little time off. We'll be back post-Combine, so we've got a lot more things to chew up from there. Aim, what did you do for the Super Bowl? How did you watch it?
In my happy place, in my home, with my husband, doors wide open, letting that California air in.
How much ice cream?
I plead the 5th.
Exactly. I watched it with 1 million people.
Yeah, how did I not know about
So this
this?
is so
Tell
crazy.
me.
One of the coolest things I've ever done. I was invited by Elf Cosmetics, which is eyes, lips, face. And
I never knew that's what ELF stood for.
I know, right?
Wow.
I always liked the brand. I have a son who loves makeup and cosmetics and all that. And he loves the brand because it's all about inclusivity and positivity and accessibility. So they invited me to come and do a webcast of the Super Bowl, like a simulcast.
How fun.
And so it was myself and Yvonne Orgel, who's an incredible comedian, and a drag performer named Heidi in Closet. And oh yeah, I mean, look, I've only done straight television my entire career, right? So straight, I'm not very funny, and
I think you're very
and so they
witty.
invited me to do this with them, and I said, this, why not? This sounds hysterical. Cooper was going to a Super Bowl party anyway, and Xana really didn't want to watch except for Taylor Swift cutaways, and my daughter was playing basketball, so I said, okay, I'll do this, right? It was so much fun interacting with this crowd of people, over 1 million people.
Now, is there any way
tuned
we
in and
can
out.
find this?
It's probably
is it online?
Yeah, I'm
so if I
sure.
Google you and this webcast, I can find it and watch you?
It was so much fun interacting with myriad people, texting in on Twitch and asking questions. And, it was not exactly X's and O's. It was not heavy-legged waist benders. It was but it was so much fun, and it was fun to be part of a different group of viewers, and very, very female positive. And
Yeah, look at what you did, and I just sat on the couch and ate.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
I mean, nothing.
But I can't wait to watch you.
Oh, it's something. And so, but yeah, it was a blast. I was really thrilled that they invited me to come, and I hope to be a part of a bunch more things with ELF moving forward. So we hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jim Nantz. We really love how you interact with us as well. And we appreciate all the positivity that comes from you, and that you have embraced this podcast, What the Football. We really hope this is what you're looking for. We love the fact that we can come to you and have leveled and measured conversations of substance and depth without yelling and screaming. And I think that's what I hope makes our podcast special. So to all of you out there who enjoyed the season with us, we thank you. Amy, love working with you as always. And
you do what the best people do, Suzy. You help others to be their best.
Well, it's my pleasure. We will see you all after the Combine.